There we go.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome into the Horseshoe Huddle Roundtable. Of course, we have a lot to react to tonight. I am your host, Josh Carney, joined here by Zach Hicks, Andrew Moore, and we will have the great Jake Arthur here later tonight. But yeah, guys, we're going to talk about Yannick Ngakoue. I'm kidding. The Colts made a significant roster.
Guys, wait. Brandon Faison. I'm here to talk about Brandon Faison. That's the only reason I'm on the show tonight.
I thought you were going to talk about Mo Alley Cox and why this.
That's the only reason I'm here. Andrew's here to talk about real news. I'm here to talk about Brandon Faison.
I think Andrew and I might break off into a little bit of a NASCAR talk.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But
how was that? How was that race in Atlanta yesterday?
Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome. That. But no, the Indianapolis Colts made a significant roster move on Monday, acquiring the 37-year-old Matt Ryan for a 2022 third-round pick. I believe that came out. It was the 82nd overall, which is the Colts' original. So they did not trade the 73rd overall pick, which came in the Carson Wentz trade from the Washington Commanders. So Chris Ballard, Frank Reich, Jim Irsay, and the Colts, they took a lot of shots the last few days, the last few weeks. They don't have a quarterback. Well, they got a quarterback now. They acquired Matt Ryan. 2-year deal. He still has 2 years left on his contract. Just over $51 million total, I believe, are the finances there. But yes, the Colts somehow fell backwards into Matt Ryan because another franchise does not treat their franchise quarterback correctly. So we are going to talk about it, as I mentioned earlier. Jake Arthur will join us later on tonight. He is doing dad duties right now. Shout out to my wife for shout out to my wife for dealing with our 2 children right now, allowing me to do this. But Zach, I want to start with you. Matt Ryan, compare him to any of the guys the Colts could have had at this point: Baker Mayfield, Jimmy Garoppolo, Jameis Winston. The Colts got a guy who's proven he can win games for you. He can be that game manager. He's still got a lot left in the tank. Where are you at on the Matt Ryan acquisition at this point for the Colts?
Honestly, the biggest. Oh, that's actually a great comment there by Matt. We'll get to your comment here in a minute, Matt. That's a great comment there. So the biggest thing I really want to say before I even jump into that part is just a masterful job by Chris Ballard this offseason. And I know, like, it comes with the asterisk that's like, yeah, it's a masterful job because it was an awful last year, off season. But my biggest complaint about last off season was Chris Ballard kind of jumped the gun. He went way too quick for Carson Wentz because he wanted to get a quarterback in the building, and he kind of outbid himself and threw a first-round pick for a guy who was not worth a first-round pick whatsoever. You guys can look back at my stuff from last year. I was not against moving for Carson Wentz. I was against how much they gave up for Carson Wentz. I went on plenty of podcasts and radio stuff and said that. And with all the fan backlash, with all the people pushing back, like, wow, the Colts don't have a quarterback for an entire week, stuff like that. People were going, insane about this for a week. Chris Ballard stayed patient. He sat back and he waited for something to fall to him. And he got 2 franchises he kind of repaid the favor that the Eagles did to him last year. He kind of got 2 franchises, trading Carson Wentz for as much as he got, and then trading the lesser of his 2 third-round picks for a better quarterback in Matt Ryan. But, when you're looking at Matt Ryan compared to all these other quarterbacks, does he have the biggest arm? Does he have the highest upside? Does he have the longest future? No. But right now, if you're looking at all the quarterbacks that the Colts could have gone with this offseason, Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston, Jimmy Garoppolo, Baker Mayfield, Carson Wentz. Matt Ryan's the best of all of those guys. Yes. He's an accurate quarterback. He can utilize the underneath game. He still has a pretty live arm. We're not talking, I think someone mentioned it earlier on Twitter, but like, we're not talking Tom Brady's kind of cannon that Tom Brady has at 44 years old. He's not that freaky, but it's better than what we had out of Phillip Rivers a couple years ago. And I was the biggest Phillip Rivers fan ever. So just looking at the traits and looking at what Matt Ryan brings to this team, I think this was the best quarterback they could have realistically got. You know, obviously you could say Russell Wilson, but Russell Wilson, you know, he had that, I think he had a no trade or something like that. So he wasn't going to waive it for Indy or it was just it was kind of a tough sell.
Sierra didn't want Indianapolis. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Honestly, I get it. She wanted Denver for some reason, but
listen, I lived out there for 6 years. I don't really know the appeal. So,
but I think, you know, again, with how awful Chris Ballard played the quarterback trade last year. And honestly, again, taking that shot at Carson Wentz, I get it last year. I completely get it. Making it so easy to become a first-round pick, though, was a disaster. I think that was just the bad part of that trade. And when we're feeling the effects of it this year, to kind of bounce back the way he has, getting all that capital for Carson Wentz back, and then barely giving up anything for Matt Ryan because he stayed patient, I think that's the biggest thing that we can really talk about there. So, great job by Chris Ballard, upgrade the quarterback position, and gain picks in the process. I think that was just a really solid add by Chris Ballard.
Andrew, I wanted to ask you as our guy Jake Arthur here joins in, but
what up?
What's going on, man? But Andrew, I wanted to ask you. You obviously did the quarterback carousel pieces throughout the offseason, and shout out to you, man. I mean, you did some deep dives on some absolute dumpster fire quarterbacks,
dude. But, I want to shout out Andrew real quick by saying I cannot imagine diving into all that stuff on just potential players. I get tired sometimes looking at players who are already on the roster, but just diving into guys who maybe have zero chance at making it on this team. Just, you know, hat off to you, Andrew. You kind of went deep into that. That was great.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
an awesome job.
It's a tough evening when you get home, get off of work, and then you have to do a deep dive into how Andy Dalton fits with the Indianapolis Colts. Wasn't my most fun evening, but hey, it allowed us a bigger picture of what all these quarterbacks could give to the Colts. And then it turns out a guy that I didn't even do on the quarterback carousel series, and Matt Ryan will be the quarterback for the Colts in 2022.
Yeah, you know, you did a great job the other day writing, you know, how could his contract fit? How could he fit? I mean, when you see that news today that Chris Ballard pulled the trigger, got Matt Ryan, you know, 5-6 years removed from NFL MVP. I mean, he was – Falcons fans are going to hate to hear this, but 11 some minutes away from winning a Super Bowl. You know, to get – Matt Ryan for what they did. What was your initial reaction when that news hit the wire?
I was really shocked. I mean, just how Zach spoke to it, that the Colts were able to get Matt Ryan for less than what the Commanders had to give up for Carson Wentz. And I really do think it was because the Colts were patient in all of this. They didn't outbid themselves against nobody like they did last year for Carson Wentz. They stuck to their guns. They weren't going to throw in the towel early. I mean, most fans are freaking out, and we're not even officially a full week into the new league year yet. And because they were patient, Matt Ryan became available. He wasn't available at the start of free agency. We didn't think that Matt Ryan had really even have a shot at being traded. But then Deshaun Watson hits the market. The Falcons decide to dive into that, and then things snowball from there. And that's when Chris Ballard pounced. I mean, this has been in the works for 10 days now. This hasn't been something that has just taken off over the last couple of days. As soon as Deshaun Watson became available, that's when Chris Ballard reached out to the Falcons and saw if Matt Ryan was available. And then even though the Falcons lost out on the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes or whatever you want to call it, Chris Ballard still stayed in contact with the Falcons all throughout the weekend, gauging Matt Ryan's interest, gauging the Falcons' interest in trading him. So I think the Colts organization did a really good job of that. And then to see them give up the third-round pick, not only just a third-round pick, but the lesser of their 2 third-round picks, I think that's key because it allows the Colts to still keep some draft capital to add for this year, but they didn't have to give up that very, very valuable first-round pick in next year's class, which is sure to be a loaded quarterback draft class next year in 2023, which even if Matt Ryan does do well, like you mentioned, he's 37 years old. He's not going to be here forever. The Colts still need to find that long-term solution at the quarterback position. And by having that first-round pick and being able to get to stock up their draft capital with that conditional third-round pick that could be a second-round pick next year, kind of package some picks, and if they love a quarterback enough, they'll be able to go up and grab that quarterback in the draft next year, whether it's to sit behind Matt Ryan retires, if they move off of him, the Colts will still be in a good spot to take a rookie quarterback next year and really start to plan for their future.
Jake, I wanted to ask you, I know it feels like every offseason at this point under Chris Ballard, the Colts have cap space, and you have the fans screaming to the high heavens. They're not doing anything. I think the loudest proponent of that the last few days has been Pat McAfee. It's like he has a meltdown every day on his show. But I think this situation shows why Chris Ballard is so patient. He likes to have the cap space because it's almost like the NBA in a sense, where you get a disgruntled star, and this wasn't Matt Ryan just building up like, oh, I want out of Atlanta. This was, oh, you're going after that guy? Like, after all I've given you, I want out of here. What does this say about Ballard's approach to team building, that he can build the roster he has, but still have that financial flexibility from a draft capital perspective and from a cap space perspective to be able to pull a trigger on a move like this?
Yeah, I think we all know and have at times grown frustrated with how frugal the front office can be, whether it's, I think all of us are kind of draft nerds. We love for them to get as much draft capital as possible, but they could be a little more liberal with how they spend money at times. I think especially, it's I don't know. You want to see them step out of their comfort zone sometimes and do some of these uncharacteristic things. And I was glad to see them do something like this with Matt Ryan. Like, sure, it eats up a lot of the cap space they had. They shrunk down to like 15 million in cap space currently. Kyle Raposa from Twitter, Colts Cap Kyle. I was talking to him a little bit earlier. The Colts have a lot of things they can do to restructure some of their bigger contracts and create more space to hopefully get Ryan more weapons. Because that's another thing I'm sure you guys heard gripes about this is, they're going to go get this semi-expensive quarterback, and now they don't have cap space to give him much. You know, they still have needs at receiver, tight end, a couple of spots on the offensive line. I would be surprised if we don't see some restructures, which we don't always see. So I think they'll probably get a little creative now. They knew this was going to be a somewhat expensive move cap space wise. So I think they'll get a little creative. I was glad, just like you guys said, they had to give up their last day 2 pick, which I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't think they'd give up a first round pick. I was hoping Atlanta wouldn't even be asking for that, but I was a bit worried they would maybe be asked to cough up 42 and fall for it. But to give up one of their 2 third-round picks and it not even be the first one, I don't know how Atlanta couldn't have swindled them out of that. But I think it was a really positive move. There's very little to gripe about. I mean, I think we all saw gripes about Matt Ryan and some fans not wanting him coming into this, but I really haven't heard much complaint since the trade went down.
Yeah, I was a little concerned, that when this was all starting to heat up and the Falcons were so heavy on Deshaun Watson, and it was pretty clear that if Matt Ryan was going to be moved, it was going to be the Colts. I expected it to be multiple draft picks. So to get him for one pick is a massive win, and he's under contract. It's not like he's a 1-year rental. I know 2 years isn't that much more than one, but you have a little bit of a foundation with him. I want to ask you guys here in this roundtable how exactly you guys see Matt Ryan fitting, because it feels so nice that we don't have to talk ourselves into Matt Ryan like we had to Carson Wentz last year. Well, if anyone can fix him, it's Frank Reich. Well, Matt Ryan doesn't need fixed. I mean, I know he's been on a bad Falcons team the last few years, but Matt Ryan's still been pretty darn good. Just kind of surface level looking at some stuff. He's still a pretty solid quarterback. I know, Zach, you kind of brought up Phillip Rivers earlier. I think if we can get 2019, 2020 Phillip Rivers, it feels like 10 years ago because of what we went through last year with Wentz. But if the Colts can get that version of Matt Ryan these next 2 years, I don't see why they wouldn't be legitimate contenders. So I want to ask you guys how you see him fitting in a Frank Reich system with the current pieces that the Colts have, knowing that they still have some work to do.
Yeah, so I'll jump in first just because I did write that film article earlier.
Yep.
I did the film room earlier. That was mostly just talking about the deep ball. Like, I want to let you guys know, I don't want to just put one article out being like, all right, film room on Matt Ryan. This is it. We're going to do one article with like 6 throws, and that's all you guys need to know about Philip Rivers. This is about Matt Ryan. This is going to be very similar to Carson Wentz, where it's like a whole off season of Matt Ryan. The mechanics of Matt Ryan series is going to be hilarious because it's going to be like, wow, this guy's really good at all these mechanics. You know,
he's the consummate professional,
dude. I was watching some of his film, and I was like I was just watching it for the deep throws, and I was like, man, like he's doing so many good things with his mechanics. But
I could see Zach. I could see Zach now. He's gonna be watching the film and be the Antonio Banderas gif where he leans back and bites his hand like, oh, this is perfect.
I will say, I saw him make, it was like 3 or 4 throws where he was rolling out of the pocket or he was moving in the pocket, and then he was setting his hallway as he was rolling out of the pocket and throwing like setting his feet, setting his hallway, and then throwing a spiral down the field. I'm like, oh, there we go.
This is great.
There we go. But, you know, like you said, when it comes to comparing him to like that Philip Rivers in 2020, I mean, post Andrew Luck, the most success the Colts have had has been Philip Rivers in 2020. And Matt Ryan has more juice. You know, he has more arm strength. He has more athleticism. And I say this with all the respect to Philip Rivers. I mean, if people look back at some of the stuff I said when Carson Wentz was acquired, I was like, there's no chance Carson Wentz gets to Philip Rivers in 2020 because Philip Rivers in 2020 was really, really good. I literally couldn't say one bad thing about Philip Rivers except he was older. That was really it. Like he was outstanding in 2020, and I would have taken 10 years of that. But I think Matt Ryan can kind of prolong that success they had in 2020. And I was talking with Joel Erickson a little earlier about this. We were just kind of talking a little bit. And the best thing about Matt Ryan is it's not like you have to, you know, it's not kind of like Carson Wentz where it's like, oh, you have to do all these things that he certainly likes or stuff like that. You know, Matt Ryan has been in so many different systems. He's been in Shanahan's system. He's been in Arthur Smith's system. You know, he was in stuff before that too. Like he can do so many different things. Yes, he probably likes more play action stuff. Yes, he likes probably more zone offense, you know, zone running offense a little bit better. But for the most part, Matt Ryan, I mean, he's been in the league long enough where he can really do anything you ask of him. You know, so if Frank Reich comes in and says, hey, we want to get these mesh concepts back and we want to get these levels concepts from back when I was learning under Tom Moore with the Colts back in, 2009 or something like that. Matt Ryan can do all that. You know, Matt Ryan can do all of that. Even if he says, let's go to more RPOs with you, Matt Ryan. Even though that's not a great fit, Matt Ryan has been in the NFL long enough to where he can be successful kind of in any offense. I mean, this past year he was thrown into an Arthur Smith offense with legitimately a desolate offense. I mean, it was Kyle Pitts, Cordarrelle Patterson, Russell Gage was pretty solid. And then a putrid offensive line. I mean, it wasn't great last year. And he went out there and he had a solid season. Not great, but a solid season. I think he was like 13th DVOA, which is around what Philip Rivers was in 2020 with the Colts. So I think you can kind of put him in whatever. And I think him and Frank Reich are just going to mesh so well because, you have a veteran quarterback who has been in so many systems. He can go in and tell Frank Reich, like, hey, I like this, I like this, I like this. And Frank Reich can be like, okay, I like this, I like this. Let's put these together and basically make the offense the way that we want to make it. And I think that's just so much better than taking a reclamation project like a Carson Wentz or like a Baker Mayfield and saying like, okay, here's the couple things you're good at. Let's try to improve upon that. Where Matt Ryan is like, okay, you can kind of do it all. Maybe you don't have that high level ceiling anymore, but you can kind of do it all. And now we can just build our offense off of that. So when it comes to how he fits in this offense, they're going to tailor the offense to him. And I think he's also going to tailor his ability to what Frank Reich wants to do. And I think it's just going to mesh really well.
Yeah, Andrew, last year down the stretch, we saw the Colts take the football out of Carson Wentz's hands. For better or worse, that's what happened. We have one comment here. I can't wait to watch checkdowns. Well, Nyheim Hines' stock went through the roof today. So that's great. But Andrew, you're going to be doing a piece tonight that I'm sure we'll post Tuesday morning about Ryan and his fit and kind of what's next. But how do you envision him fitting in a Frank Reich system, kind of compared to what we saw from Carson Wentz last year? Obviously, Ryan's not going to bring that mobility, that extend the play stuff, but just in terms of down the field throws and progressions and concepts, how do you envision Ryan fitting into this Colts offense?
I honestly think it opens up the offense a little bit more because you're not Frank Reich, I don't think needs to necessarily focus in on what Matt Ryan can do well, because like Zach said, he can really do pretty much everything well. And that was the concern with Carson Wentz, that you had to tailor the offense so much to his strengths because his weaknesses were just so weak. And that really made the passing offense one dimensional. And you saw defenses really evolve to that as the season went on. They don't have to do that anymore. They can use multiple different concepts and whatever is going to work against that week's defense to really exploit that. You no longer have to worry about a guy holding on to the ball way too long and creating pressure for himself, because Matt Ryan gets rid of the ball so quickly. He's a guy that can read every single defense and is fantastic at the line of scrimmage, something that Frank Reich loved his ability with Phillip Rivers, loved that Andrew Luck had that ability. And it really is something that ever since he's gotten here in 2018, he's harped on that his quarterback needs to have that. And so I think we're not necessarily going to see an offense tailored to Matt Ryan's strengths. I could really see it tailored to the playmaker strengths, like a Jonathan Taylor, like Michael Pittman. Nyheim Hines will certainly get more involved. I saw Stats Matt, a friend of a Colts podcast, talk about that, and just really let Ryan go where he needs to go. That's a great point. Matt Ryan, his hand doesn't need to be held like Carson Wentz, like Jacoby Brissett. You can turn the offense over to Matt Ryan and trust that he's going to make the right decision every single time or close to it. So that's why I think when you put him behind a Colts offensive line, that while they struggled in 2021, I don't think that's a secret to anybody. I fully expect a bounce back season from a healthy Quentin Nelson, from a healthy Ryan Kelly, and a Ryan Kelly that's not going through an incredible personal tragedy. Healthy Braden Smith. The Colts, it seems like, want to give Danny Pinter a shot at right guard. I absolutely love that idea. And then as of right now, Matt Pryor at left tackle, who I thought played very admirably last year when called upon. So I do think this Colts offensive line is poised to take a step up, and that's just only going to help Matt Ryan and his ability to perform as the quarterback of the Indianapolis Colts. So when you put all of that together on top of the moves that the Colts are going to make, because like I said, we're not even a full week into the new league year. There's still plenty of free agents out there at wide receiver and tight end. There's a fantastic draft class at wide receiver that's out there that I'm sure the Colts will be wanting to dive into. So we're really going to see what happens here in the next couple months. But I think Ryan fits very well in this offense. I think Frank Reich is going to have a lot of fun being able to use so many different concepts and so many different ways to get the ball into the Colts playmakers' hands, that I think we're really going to see a huge step up in efficiency in this offense, and an offense that's really going to excel as they get more players involved in 2022.
Jake, I wanted to ask you, there was that report out there from, I believe it was ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, that when the Colts were searching for their next quarterback, Frank Reich wanted someone that was ready to go in off-season training activities and minicamp and all that. So that kind of rolled out Jimmy Garoppolo, Baker Mayfield. How much stock did you put into that report? And do you think that was maybe the I don't want to say tiebreaker, but one of the key things that made the decision to go after Ryan compared to a Baker Mayfield or a Jimmy Garoppolo? Do you think that significantly impacted the decision overall for the Colts? Oh, looks like Jake's muted here.
You muted Jake. I didn't mute him.
Can you hear me?
We got you, Jake.
Okay. No, this headset sucks. It's probably it. But no, I think the availability plays a big part into it. I know the Jimmy Garoppolo shoulder surgery thing was that was going to be a real big issue, and probably not anything they were going to spend any reasonable draft pick on, because they've been down that road before with a quarterback with shoulder surgery. Not to mention that's your new starter. It's not a guy who's already been there. Like, they need the on-field reps. They've got other free agent receivers and tight ends they're going to need to work into. Like, it's important for this guy to be here now, or as soon as off-season work begins, basically. Ryan is also a guy who kind of like Zach mentioned, he's not a reclamation project, and you're not having to like redo anything. Like he's tailor made to go right now. He's a smart guy who's seen a lot of different schemes. You can throw the playbook at him, let him digest it, but he's ready to process things right away. You're not starting at a negative, basically. I think that was a big part of it. They're looking for someone who's got the smarts, because as much as stuff like Wentz's inaccuracy and stuff was an issue for them, I'm pretty sure the mental side of it was as well. Not just like the snap mental mistakes, but like think of how many times a play died in the backfield and you see the replay and Wentz just had tunnel vision at the line and couldn't identify a blitz to save his life before the snap, So just having a quarterback who's ready to go day one in the offseason program and who's already ahead of the curve mentally, I think that was huge for them.
Jake, going back to your pros and cons piece, two things I wanted to touch on with you quickly. You wrote in the pros, Ryan reportedly wanted to be in Indianapolis. And then building off of that, he's the type of leader the Colts want. How do you see that working out? I mean, it's always tough for, a new face in a new place to kind of find that leadership role. But we saw it with Phillip Rivers, his 1 year in Indianapolis. He came right in, even without an offseason, and was kind of that leader. But how much will it help Ryan's introduction into the Colts, knowing that he brings that leadership, and this is a place he wanted to be, and he wanted to be a Colt. How much does that impact his working into the program here?
I think it's a big deal, and one big reason I've been thinking about that is in the past, some of the quarterbacks the Colts have had, the veterans, it's been how the Colts defensive players have talked about them, and especially like Darius Leonard or Kenny Moore talking about how Andrew Luck or Phillip Rivers helped them grow as players. I don't think I ever once heard that about Carson, other than, maybe it was unique to deal with some of the physical stuff he could do. But I'm really excited to see how the defensive players react to playing against Matt Ryan, him spotting things they're about to do before the snap and things like that, and different tips and tricks he can give them and say, I knew you were about to do this because, and just from observing his career, the last 14 years, whatever, you see him communicating with his teammates, maybe pulling a receiver aside and saying, I was maybe expecting you a step or two in this direction, stuff like that. Just having a guy who's out there to help make everyone else better is a big bonus.
Yeah. Zach, I know we mentioned in our quick pre-show rundown, you wanted to mention some things you heard leading up to this situation. Just walk us through what you heard about the whole Matt Ryan acquisition from the Colts perspective. Just kind of let us know how this came together in a sense.
Yeah, so I don't want to say I'm an insider, guys. I hear whispers at best. I hear very
insider Zach Hicks right here.
Please no, do not call me an insider. It's the last thing I want to be. I'm an analyst that just hears some things. But I talked to quite a few people around the league. From knowing agents and knowing some people around the league and stuff like that. And I was also talking a lot with Rashad McGinnis a lot this week, who's the insider for the Colts. Rashad McGinnis, I'm telling you guys, he is a legit insider. He knows a lot of people who are actually in the league, so he knows a lot more than me. If you're looking for an insider, Rashad McGinnis, not me. But from talking with Rashad and talking with other people and talking with agents and stuff, the biggest thing that this really came down to was, I told you guys before the Watson trade happened, I was like, hey, Watson's probably going to Atlanta. Matt Ryan's probably going to go to Indy. And we actually wrote a skeleton. I think Jake, I think you were the one who wrote this. Did you write like a skeleton article on it, basically?
Yeah, I had something ready to go on that. In that article, I had it ready to go for if Watson chose Atlanta or New Orleans.
Yep.
And then he chose Cleveland. And I was like, you got to be kidding. I have to rewrite this basically.
Yeah. So I told the guys before, I was like, look, if Watson goes to Atlanta, which it looks like it's going to happen, Matt Ryan's going to end up in Indy. Like it's a foregone conclusion. I got told that by like 4 different people, like just reaching out to me. And then when Watson just kind of pulled the hood on everything and he went to Cleveland, I legitimately was like, oh, there goes the whole Matt Ryan thing. But from everything I heard, they treated Matt Ryan like terrible in this whole situation. And I get, I feel like even Matt Ryan could understand, if you're going to swing for a younger player, or you're a younger quarterback or something like that, like I get it. But to keep pushing back his bonus for a guy who, yes, he's talented, but with all the baggage that comes with him, and you're doing this to the best player, arguably the best player in your franchise history, definitely the best quarterback in your franchise history.
He's kept that franchise afloat since the dark days of Vic. I mean,
right. And then, he came in right after Michael Vick and stabilized an entire franchise, took them to the Super Bowl, won an MVP, was huge in the community, was a huge, just beloved in all of Atlanta. To treat him like that for a guy with that kind of baggage, it didn't sit right. Obviously, with Matt Ryan, with his wife, I know was active on Twitter about stuff like this. And that's the biggest thing. If you upset the wife, it's over right there. Yeah. And then obviously his agency and stuff so it's just it didn't sit right. And I think it got to the point where that relationship was completely broken. And it wasn't broken to the point where they couldn't communicate or they couldn't, Matt Ryan couldn't say like, hey, look, this is where I want to go. Please help me facilitate to the place I want to go. So I think why it came down to the wire, why it came down to Monday is Atlanta really wanted to put this facade like, hey, Indy, we might trade him somewhere else, like give us more. But Indy didn't budge. And honestly, again, this goes to what I said at the very beginning. Chris Ballard gave way too much for Carson Wentz. He caved. He gave up too much for Carson Wentz. This time he didn't budge. He gave that 3rd round pick and he said, I'm sticking with this 3rd round pick. And Atlanta wanted to do right by their star player that they mistreated basically. And so they sent him to the place that he wanted to go. So you end up having this team because it doesn't make sense on paper. Why would Atlanta eat $40 million in dead cap?
That's what I don't understand.
If we go back to Brock Osweiler trade, Cleveland ate, I think, like $60 million in cap, along with the cap space for that 1 year for a second, and I think a little bit more as well.
I think it was a second and a fifth. I think
second and a fifth, right? So they got more than what Atlanta got for their star quarterback that they're trading away to eat similar amounts of cap. It doesn't make sense on paper, but at the end of the day, they fractured that relationship. Matt Ryan wanted to go to Indy, and they wanted to do right by their star player. And I know for a fact that the agency that reps Matt Ryan kind of wanted to do like a similar thing to what Detroit did with Matt Stafford. Send him to the organization that he wants to go. Like let's do right by your star player. And eventually Atlanta caved, and the Colts get an upgrade at quarterback on a really affordable deal for just a 3rd round pick. So it kind of ended up working out perfectly for Chris Ballard. I don't know if this is the way he planned it all going.
That's what I was going to say. I mean,
it could have gone. I do know for a fact, I will say for a fact, and I know I told you guys about this, that their backup option was Jameis Winston.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy that they got their plan A.
Could you?
Because Jameis on the field is fine. I'm not cool with
some of the off the field.
Off the field stuff. So they got their plan A. They got the guy they wanted. They did have plan B and a plan C, which is Marcus Mariota. So they had their plan B and plan C. Marcus Mariota is a great dude. Amazing dude. I would have been cool with him as a person.
Yeah. Maybe not on the field. Immediately he signs with the Falcons, which I think we all saw that coming. But
at the end of the day, it just really came down to Chris Ballard played this perfectly, and he had a little bit of luck on his side. I think ultimately, if you would have asked him a couple weeks ago how he would have envisioned getting Matt Ryan, it would have been because Deshaun Watson went to Atlanta.
Right.
But he still ended up getting Matt Ryan and for a very affordable price, a very affordable contract. And Atlanta's eating that $40 million dead cap. Along with just getting a 3rd round pick, and they have to live with kind of just sending out their best player in franchise history. The Falcons organization comes out looking like horrible.
It's back-to-back years too. I mean, what did they get for Julio? Was that
They got a second. They got more for Julio. They got more for Mohamed Sanu back at the trade deadline years ago.
True. Yeah. You know,
I was gonna say, from what I've seen from Falcons people today, they're not happy.
No,
not just about losing the quarterback they've known for the last decade and a half, but how the organization treated him.
Right.
I was watching Charles McDonald was on with Josh Norris, and I watched that, and that, that's rough to see for someone who's put so much into that fan base. And then one of my good friends is a lifelong Falcons fan from Atlanta, and he's been talking to me for the last week about how this just isn't right. But
it's I think there was the report from Adam Schefter, which I think we've all learned at this point, kind of take what these insiders report initially with a grain of salt, because it's all agent speak. But I think Schefter had initially, when the Falcons emerged as a quote unquote contender for Watson, that Arthur Blank, personally reached out to Matt Ryan and discussed the whole situation with him. None of that was true. I mean, this hurt Matt Ryan, and
his wife said that. His wife came out and responded to Adam Schefter and said, like, no,
this is not true.
Which,
and so
the one thing I will say with Arthur Blank is Arthur Blank's the reason why Atlanta was going after Watson. Watson reached out to Arthur Blank, and Arthur Blank was like, hey, we'll go after Deshaun Watson. The GM did not want to. The coach did not want to. They wanted to stick by Matt Ryan. It's a horrible. I don't know how the Falcons are going to recover from this. Like, they need to hit on their next quarterback that they take, but it's a brutal way to end, again, one of their best players in franchise history. It's a brutal way to end that.
It's kind of crazy looking at that, and with the involvement that Arthur Blank has, and basically making the final decision, like, we're going to go after Deshaun Watson. Can you imagine Jim Irsay doing that? I mean, Jim Irsay, he's going to have a say in the quarterback, and of course you're going to have the videos on the tarmac saying we're going all chips in. But at the end of the day, he lets Chris Ballard make those decisions. He trusts that Chris Ballard's going to make the move. He trusts that Frank Reich's going to do his job. He's not his father. He's not Bob Irsay in the slightest. He watched Bob Irsay completely destroy this franchise for years. And I think that he's obviously learned from that. And now in this regime, and I think he did the same with Bill Polian and Tony Dungy, he let those guys, the guys that he hired to make those football decisions, he lets them do their jobs. And I can probably count on one hand the amount of times Jim Irsay has overruled Chris Ballard and Frank Reich since they've been there. And I think that's a great quality to have as an owner, because you're an owner for a reason. You're not the GM. If you hire the GM to make the decisions, let the GM and the head coach make those decisions.
Yeah, and like we mentioned earlier, it's just a credit to the Colts for being in a position ready to strike. I know a lot of fans have gotten after Chris Ballard a lot, and the media have gotten after them for kind of being patient and quote unquote falling behind. But patience pays off, and they got a guy who, I know we're going to touch on it here in a second. They still have some holes on this roster, but I think they have a guy that could lead them to an AFC South division championship and could lead them deep into the playoffs, because he's just that cerebral. He's a great leader. He can make all the throws. He's not going to kill you. We don't have to watch a one-handed, left-handed interception from your own goal line in a division game anymore. So that's what's going to be fantastic. Jim is too focused on buying his next music. I wonder what his next piece would be. Guys, the next question here, I mean, obviously they've got their quarterback, but significant holes at receiver. Obviously, the Colts lost Zach Pascal. Pour one out for Zach Hicks here. Lost Zach Pascal to the Eagles today. Jack Doyle retired. Chris Reed's status, last I checked, is still up in the air. That's a guy I would hate to lose. There's just some holes on this roster offensively, and then there's still some issues defensively that I think they need to kind of fix. So, guys, what's next? I know that the one name I've seen constantly thrown out since the acquisition of Matt Ryan happened, aside from Julio Jones, has been left tackle Terron Armstead. Brandon Thorne, who does trench warfare, does great work. Believes Armstead would be a perfect fit in Indianapolis, but that's a significant price tag. What's next for these guys? What's the most important hole to fill at this point? Who are some names? Let's just throw it out to you three and see where we end up.
I mean, I can jump in first, but I think when we're looking at all of the needs that this team has, I don't think it's as huge as what some other people say. Like, yes, I've seen people say like, oh, the Colts are this great team that's going to win the AFC South. No, I do think they need more to this roster, but I don't think it's gaping holes like everyone says. At cornerback, I think Isaiah Rodgers, Kenny Moore, and Brandon Faison are good. That's a good trio to have. Like, you obviously want to have more, but I think it's a good trio to have. Could they add another safety? Yes, but the two safeties they have are pretty solid. So I think there's they have some good options right now at some of these holes. At left tackle, that people say I think Matt Pryor could be a solid left tackle if they gave him the whole season. But we were talking kind of pre-show, talking about like our notes and stuff beforehand. But the Colts can add a lot more cap space, and I know Jake mentioned it with Colts Cap Kyle. You guys definitely got to follow him on Twitter. The guy that I defer to when it comes to cap stuff, Kyle Verposa, Colts Cap Kyle. He said that the Colts in the past have added restructures. They have done stuff like that to increase the cap in the past years. I think last year with DeForest Buckner, they restructured his contract to add more cap space. So they could do that this year as well with guys like Darius Leonard, with guys like Braden Smith. They could add more cap from those deals. And I think you don't have any studs in free agency left. That's why they're still available here in the second week. But a guy like a Julio Jones, a guy like a Keelan Cole, who could fill a lot of roles as a depth receiver. When you go to left tackle, maybe not Teron Armstead, but like a Dwayne Brown or Cornelius Lucas could be solid players. On defense, there's still like 10 players that have Gus Bradley ties, and Gus Bradley is probably going to Chris Ballard every single day saying, I need to bring all of my guys back, because that's how Gus Bradley operates. Gus Bradley needs to have the same guys everywhere he goes. So I think there's plenty of guys they could still add. It's free agency still young, and this is when Chris Ballard does his best work in free agency. It's those second and third tier guys. Danico Autry on the second week of the 2018 free agency, and look how well he played for the Colts. Xavier Rhodes, I think 3 weeks in to free agency, and they got a really solid year out of him in 2020, and a pretty decent year this past year as well. I mean, Chris Ballard finds these guys, and these guys will come in. And I mean, the best one that they signed for 1 year, $1 million, Chris Reed last year on April 1st. I didn't even know who that was, and I went to the tape and I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's going to be a stud. And he was really good last year. So Chris Ballard will find some guys that fill out these holes. I'm not terribly worried, but I do think the biggest aspect is going to be coming down to the draft. They kept pick 42, they kept pick 73. They're going to have to add, some more to this, obviously, this wide receiver room, maybe more to the left tackle position through the draft. And if I was a betting man, I would say,
I know where this is going.
Wide receiver at 42 is very much in play. I think from everything I've heard, the Colts want another young wide receiver, and they want to take another swing at them. So a guy like Alec Pierce from Cincinnati, I don't think I've ever mentioned him before, but Alec Pierce from Cincinnati at 42, Christian Watson from North Dakota State, which you guys can check on our channel here. I did an interview with him on this channel here, so you can click off of this and go check that. Or I think I had an agent text me, an agent who's not connected to the Colts anyway. He was just hitting me up, but John Mechie, if he's there at 42. Yeah. I think that would be an outstanding fit for what the Colts need. I think they're going to use that 42nd pick to either move up into the first to take a receiver, or just stay put and take a swing at one of these receivers, because they need another young receiver. So I would, if I had to put money on what they do with that 42nd pick, it's going to be adding a receiver for Matt Ryan. They're gonna address these holes.
Yeah, they're not going to go in. Yeah, they're not going to go into the season with. I don't even know who the number 3 receiver would be at this point on the roster.
Desmond Patman.
Well,
Patman.
I mean, I like
Ashton
him.
Doolin. Ashton Doolin.
Fair.
Yes.
Fair. Yep. Yeah,
but I think this kind of I fully believe the Colts are going to be more active, especially in the second and third wave, and then into the draft to put more weapons around Matt Ryan. You're not going to go out and get Matt Ryan just to have him throw to Michael Pittman Jr. and that's it. You got us. One of the reasons that maybe Matt Ryan had more of a down year last year, combined with how awful that Atlanta offensive line was, is he didn't have anybody to throw to. I mean, with Calvin Ridley out most of the year. He had Kyle Pitts. That was about it. Justin Gage. But you need those weapons. I mean, Chris Ballard in his end of season press conference, where we got to read the tea leaves. He's always dropping little nuggets of what the Colts are thinking. He said, we need a tight end that stretches the field, that stretches down the middle. They still haven't got that. I don't think that Mo Alley Cox really solves that. I think Mo Alley Cox could fill in the Jack Doyle role, but I don't see Mo Alley Cox as being someone that you necessarily game plan for. Now, whether Kylan Granson turns into that or not, we'll have to see, but the Colts are still going to be looking for that weapon down the seam. Obviously, you need to have another wide receiver, a deep threat wide receiver, to pair with Michael Pittman Jr. Whether Paris Campbell can turn into that, we'll have to see. But Chris Ballard said at the combine, I mean, yeah, they love Paris Campbell, they love his potential, but can they count on him being the second or third wide receiver? As of right now, no. Because something I say all the time, the best ability is availability, and Paris Campbell can't do that as of right now. So you're going to need to add that speed wide receiver, just more weapons to make this offense more dynamic. Because while you do have, I mean, Jonathan Taylor speaks for himself. Michael Pittman continues to ascend. Nyheim Hines is a weapon. There needs to be more talent on the outside. And if you're going to make that swing for Matt Ryan to come in here, you better make the appropriate swings next to it to bring in the guys that can support him and really bring this offense up to that next level where it can compete with all the other high-powered offenses in the AFC.
Jake, where are you at just in terms of needs and hopeful next few dominoes to fall here for the Colts?
Yeah, keeping in mind, like Zach said, that one of these first two picks is almost definitely going to be a receiver as long as there's one that they like. They're obviously not going to reach for it. I do still think they're going to add another couple guys to the pass catcher group in free agency. At the beginning of free agency, there was talk about some initial interest in Marquez Valdez-Scantling if they want to get a guy that can stretch the field. Because, I mean, Pittman is their X. They need more of someone opposite him that's going to be more of a downfield guy. I think we all would like to see these young guys develop and claim a bigger role. Ashton Doolin, Patman, Mike Strawn would be that would be huge if he can actually claim a role, and having Matt Ryan might actually help that, having a quarterback that knows what to do there. But no, I think they'll make a couple modest moves. Maybe someone like Robert Tonyan at tight end, that could make some sense. The middle rounds of this draft seem pretty good with tight ends too. So I wouldn't be shocked to see them get a tight end and a receiver both in the draft, but I expect a couple modest moves. Defensively, I don't think they'll do too much yet in free agency. At least I don't see it being like a huge priority other than Gus Bradley guys as more become available or what have you. I think we're probably going to need to see another one or two offensive linemen added. Again, probably modest deals. I don't see a huge Teron Armstead deal coming. Maybe something like Cornelius Lucas, exactly like Zach said, something that's a reasonable price, like a low risk, high reward type of move. Him and Matt Pryor, because another thing with Teron Armstead, you give him however much guaranteed money, the guy misses a lot of games. So you're basically going to be paying him to have Matt Pryor start for him for a quarter of the season. So I think we're through the point of any huge expensive free agent moves. I kind of expect the Colts to get down to their normal nitty gritty now that they've made their big splash quarterback move. There's just not a lot of huge names out there that I think would be great fits here.
Yeah, just kind of looking at the free agents available at tight end and receiver. Obviously, Jake brought up a Robert Tonyan. I kind of expect him to go back to the Packers since they just lost Devontae
He
Adams.
actually re-signed with them the other day. Like yesterday.
Did he really?
Okay.
One year deal. Yep,
okay.
1 year deal.
Gotcha.
So
what about Max Williams? Max Williams? Did he go back?
I think he's out there still. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's still on there. But I mean, it's slim pickings. I mean, if you want to try and revive the 35-year-old Jimmy Graham, I mean, he's probably, aside from Rob Gronkowski, the best tight end available, and Gronk's not leaving Tampa with Brady back. You've got Anthony Ferkser in Tennessee. Obviously, Tennessee just added Austin Hooper. Ferkser, the Colts are certainly familiar with him at this point. but it's just bleak at tight end. I mean, Jacob Hollister, Steven Anderson, Chris Herndon's interesting, but he'd be on his third team in 4 years. So it's pretty bleak there at tight end. Receiver, I mean, Will Fuller.
I like a couple of the receivers. Keelan Cole's out there. I like Keelan Cole. He can do multiple things.
Sammy Watkins is still out there.
The Colts wanted Sammy Watkins last year.
Correct. How about this one? He could be a really good fit for last year's team. Are you ready? Cole Beasley. I mean, come on, guys.
Yeah. I wonder if is there a chance that T.Y. Hilton now comes back, because the Colts have the quarterback in place now, and I think T.Y. was really wanting to see what happened. I mean, we all know how big of a fan he is of Reggie Wayne, how him and Reggie Wayne are so close. If the market ends up not being very good for T.Y. Hilton, and he doesn't get that opportunity to go to a contender, do you think he comes back to the Colts on a lower end deal to fit in now that they have Matt Ryan there, someone that I think with the cerebral nature of Matt Ryan's play combined with the high football IQ that T.Y. Hilton has, I mean, I don't expect it to be anything of the deal that he got last year, but I think the Colts would probably keep that door open just in case.
What deal did he get last year? Was it a 1 year, like 11?
1 year, $8 million.
$8 million. Okay.
So I'd be cool with T.Y. coming back. I love T.Y. I think he would be a great fit with Matt Ryan, like he was a great fit with Phillip Rivers. I've done so much of this study stuff on Chris Ballard receivers. T.Y. Hilton's just not. It's not a Chris Ballard receiver at all. And I think you could see that last year where, Irsay kind of had to step in and say, resign T.Y. Hilton. Yeah. I just don't see that being a guy that Chris Ballard's going to value a ton. Like, again, if it comes down to last year where he's available late, sure, I can see him coming back, but I don't think he's a priority for Chris Ballard. And I think you can kind of see, because, you don't want to, I don't like looking up too much into players' social medias or anything like that, but like, all these players are going crazy about like, oh, Matt Ryan. T.Y. Hilton's not acting like a Colts player with that. He's a free agent, and he's very much acting like a free agent. I just don't think I don't think T.Y. Hilton's going to be back. It could be a situation again though, where like late in the process he ends up being back. But I think I don't know. Like I haven't heard anything on this, but I just think Julio Jones makes a ton of sense for the Colts to take a swing at.
That's what I was going to ask. I know you put it out there.
Like a 1 year deal. Like a 1 year deal. Yeah. I think it makes, because if you look at Julio last year, yes, he was injured the whole year, like just on and off injuries, but he still had a very healthy yards per catch. He still had a very healthy average depth of target, very healthy. He was catching a lot of the passes thrown his way. He was producing when he was on the field. It's just he was barely on the field. So, I mean, I think if you're going to take a 1 year flyer on a guy, and again, Julio, where he's on the back end of his career, he gets to reunite with a guy who he's had success with for almost his entire career. I just think that's a shot that the Colts can take, and that'll be fun. You take that shot on Julio, and then you take your receiver, your John Mechie, your Alec Pierce, your whatever in the draft. And if Julio is healthy, awesome, great. You get a Julio Jones along with Michael Pittman Jr. and a young draft kid. If he only plays maybe half the year, you get Julio for half the year, but you're going to rely on those young kids that you were going to rely on regardless. So I think that shot makes a ton of sense for them. But again, if they don't go that shot, I just want to see them add a veteran just to add depth to this receiver group, because right now we're looking at Michael Pittman Jr. Then we're looking at Ashton Dulin, who's played some snaps. And that's really it for all guys who've actually played real snaps at receiver on this depth chart. So you got to add at least something there in terms of veteran. But I just think Julio makes a ton of sense. I really think that makes a ton of sense for the team.
I think he makes more sense than he did in Tennessee. Tennessee's just not going to feature certain guys. Like even A.J. Brown, like he has the occasional high volume game, but he doesn't get the ball as much as he should, even when Henry was hurt. I just don't think that was a real place that was going to accentuate someone like Julio Jones, which makes it look worse, coupled with the fact that he was hurt. A healthy Julio Jones, I think, fits pretty well here in Indianapolis.
I do want to ask you guys, any interest in Jarvis Landry? Because my thinking is obviously Zach Pascal went out the door. I know Zach's shaking his head quickly, but
Not really.
who's the slot guy here? Who's the who fills that role? Who can come in and kind of be that possession guy, that little bit of a blocker? Where do they go here? I mean, obviously Landry, I think he's been mostly overrated his entire career. I know he had those 2 straight 100 catch seasons in Miami. Didn't really do anything in Cleveland, but he's kind of that tough over the middle guy, can give you some blocking. He's a good leader. Where do they go at slot receiver now that Pascal's in Philadelphia?
I honestly think Julio Jones could even fit that role. If you think about it, if the Colts went the route of like an Alec Pierce or a Christian Watson in the second round, I mean, those guys are big body wide receivers as well. They've got speed. You can put them on the outside, and then Julio becomes that possession type security blanket for Matt Ryan over the slot. Nyheim Hines could be an option as well. But I think that could be a very good role for Julio, because he's not necessarily relied upon to stretch the field. He could be in the slot and make those tough third down catches. I mean, Julio's a big enough guy, and I think he's shown enough effort in the blocking game that he could do that as well. So I really like that idea, and it's the kind of like the low risk, high reward type of contract that Chris Ballard loves to give guys in the second and third wave of free agency, where we know Julio Jones is probably going to have some sort of a market, but it's not going to be a huge market. So what better way to entice him to come to Indy than to have his longtime quarterback and Matt Ryan there under center?
Even bringing up the Julio Jones name, that reminds me a lot. Andre Johnson, end of his career. He was in Indianapolis. Obviously, Julio a little bit better than Andre was at that point in his career. But all right, seriously, how many comments of Nyheim Hines in the slot did we get, Zach? I mean,
I was instigating it. I appreciate you guys. So the one thing I'll add, I did get a lot of people responding though with when I put on Twitter about Julio Jones saying like, oh, Andre Johnson. The thing is, Julio, you'd bring him in just to take a shot on him, right? Ryan Grigson was relying on Andre Johnson back in the day.
Like he was relying. He's our number one. We're good.
He was relying on him. And Matt actually brings up another guy here. AJ Green would also make a lot of sense, because AJ Green kind of revitalized his career last year in Arizona. He came in Arizona, had 800 yards receiving. I think he had like 6 or 7 touchdowns too. Like had a really solid season. So that's a great one there, Matt. And I will say, if we're talking purely from agency stuff, just because I'm a nerd and go hard into like researching agencies.
It definitely matters. Yeah,
it matters. So you had Tom Condon and it was Collective Arts Agency, CAA, that represents Matt Ryan, who wanted him in Indy. So this agency wants him in Indy, and again, this agency represents Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, a lot of guys who are getting big deals in Indy. They also rep Julio Jones, and they also rep Jared Cook at tight end. And Tom Condon did rep AJ Green back in the day quite a bit as well. For a bit as well. I don't think he does anymore, but he did for a while. So those are just a couple. Those are a couple guys that have that agency connection, or at least have had like a positive connection with this kind of stuff here. So the options are not amazing right now at receiver or tight end, but there are a couple where you can bring in where you can at least say like, hey, we're going to take a shot on this guy, throw him into this offense with Matt Ryan and Frank Reich and see what they do. So, a guy like a Jared Cook, a guy like Julio Jones, a guy like AJ Green, they're past their prime, but they can still give you productive snaps with a guy like Matt Ryan.
Yeah, the last point I'll make before we wrap up here too is, Matt Ryan is that he can make it work with whoever's on the field. I mean, we mentioned earlier he was throwing to Russell Gage and what was his last name? Zacharias.
Olamide Zacharias. That's my dude from back in the day.
I couldn't remember how to pronounce his first name.
That's my dude.
He had a heck of a year.
Proud of him.
He had a heck of a year. But I don't think that's a guy you're going, okay, that's our number 2 receiver, But Matt Ryan is that he makes everyone around him better. And Hines on a Texas route out of the backfield. That's my go-to in Madden. You cannot stop me. I'm sorry to tell you. But another connection with Tom Condon too is he represented the guy that's got a statue out front of Lucas Oil Stadium in Peyton Manning. Right. So that's a big one right there. Very true. But guys, I think we're all in agreement. The Colts are in a much better situation now than they were, 24 hours ago. Getting a guy like Matt Ryan in the room feels a heck of a lot better than a Baker Mayfield or shout out to Andrew for writing this is why you don't go after Baker Mayfield piece, or hoping that Jimmy Garoppolo is the answer, or Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston. It just, there's still a lot of work to be done with this roster. You still have the draft coming up. As Zach mentioned earlier, this is the time where Ballard really makes his name as a general manager year after year. Actual football is still a ways away, but it's hard to not feel really good about the direction the Colts are heading in for the 2022 season.
Yeah. And for all you guys who left comments and stuff, I mean, we have a ton of viewers here in our live stream. I really appreciate you guys jumping in. I know you guys have asked a lot of questions. I will go live with one. I'll grab one of these guys later in the week. We'll go live just to purely do Q&A and questions and stuff like that, and address all that. We wanted to go out here today on the roundtable and just kind of talk about Matt Ryan and talk about our thoughts with stuff. Later this week, I'll aim for like Wednesday or Thursday. I'll grab one of these guys and we'll go live and just talk all about your questions, answer your questions. So turn out for that. I'll follow my Twitter and stuff like that, and I'll post when we go live for that. But I just wanted to give a great shout out to you guys for jumping in tonight. I know there's a lot more excitement tonight than the past week that we've had. So I appreciate you guys all jumping in and listening to us talk about Matt Ryan and all this stuff here.
Yeah, maybe next week we'll have an all Nyheim Hines podcast. So.
Yes, yes.
But hey, for Zach, Andrew, Jake, and myself, that's going to do it for the roundtable here on Horseshoe Huddle. Matty Ice, baby. We're full steam ahead for 2022. So thanks for tuning in. Until later in the week, we'll chat with you.
Sweet.